Good morning. Welcome to BSides Las Vegas Common Ground. This talk is Escape the Questionnaire Quagmire by Katie Ledoux, who works for Rapid7. A few announcements before we begin. We'd like to thank our sponsors, especially our Inner Circle sponsors, Critical Stack and Volley Mail, and our stellar sponsors, BlackBerry, the National Security Agency, and Secure Code Warrior, among other sponsors. It is their support, along with our other sponsors, donors, and volunteers, that make this event possible. These talks are being streamed live, except for Underground. As a courtesy to our speakers and audience, we ask that you check to make sure your cell phones are set to silent. And if you have a question, we will have you use the audience microphone, which I am holding, so YouTube can hear you. Please raise your hand and I'll bring it over. For this talk, we'll do you want to... Oh, there you are. Do you want to do questions at the end or questions in line?
Oh, questions during it are great too.
Okay, so questions during it are fine. If you have one, raise your hand and I'll bring the mic over. And with that, let's get started. Welcome, Katie. Turn your mic on.
Is it happening? Can you hear me? Yeah, good?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know because I can yell a lot too. So I am Katie Ledoux. I am the Senior Manager of Trust and Security Governance at Rapid7. And we are all here today because of a fun thing called information security questionnaires. We know them, we love them. And for anyone who is not familiar with what I'm talking about at all, third-party security risk management requires collecting a ton of information from vendors. So if, for example, you want to buy a Rapid7 solution, you very reasonably might want to know how we might be protecting any of your data that we are storing. But how do you or your risk management team collect enough information to make that call, to really know, can I give this vendor the green light, or are they, are we taking on too much risk by working with them? Today, the way a lot of these companies go about collecting that information is they send a giant InfoSec questionnaire to the security team at the vendor company. And like everything we do at Rapid7, we want to address these questionnaires in the way that we think is best for our customers. And intuitively, we might think doing what's best for our customers is the same as doing exactly what our customers are asking us to do. So in this case, that would mean following their request to a T. They send us a questionnaire, ask the security team to fill it out, we fill it out. They say jump, we say how high. But I want to dig into whether that approach actually is what is best for our customers, because there are some consequences to taking this approach. So one of those consequences is slowed security maturity. These questionnaires are very time consuming. I actually am just wondering, who has done a security questionnaire? Who's worked on? Okay, so you know the problem statement. It was everyone YouTube. So these are very, very time consuming, as you know, and while you are working on them, there is a ton of work in your backlog that you are not touching. So is deprioritizing meaningful security work doing what's best for customers? Methinks not. Problem number 2, our team is not engaged by this work. This is a team of security professionals. Filling out spreadsheets is really not fulfilling to them. So is letting some of our most talented security professionals leave our company doing what's best for our customers? Again, I do not think it is. And thirdly, there's some quality control concerns here. So human error happens, and I know from experience that it's very likely to happen when you're 3/4 of the way into an 800 question questionnaire. So in addition to the fact that it's just kind of, it's grueling, you can make mistakes, some of these questions are really ambiguous and vague. A lot of these companies are sending the same questionnaire to every company. So if there's just a generic question about what are your password complexity requirements, one analyst might read that to be our corporate environment password complexity requirements. Another analyst might think that means what are the password complexity requirements for a user who's logging into our solutions? And it's too subjective. There's too much opportunity for misinformation to get in there. So again, I it's another way that I don't think this approach is really what's doing best for our customers. We don't want to be giving them misleading or confusing information. So with all those things in mind, we thought that there might be a better way to handle these inquiries. Something that was both better for us and also, most importantly, better for our customers. So we started down a new path. This is also the only meme in my entire presentation. I am a grown adult woman now. I used to use exclusively memes. Now I'm on to stock photos. So we invested a significant amount of time creating documents that address our security FAQs, the stuff that you see over and over and over in all of these questionnaires. And we had a plan. When a customer asked us to fill out their questionnaire, we would send them our documentation and we would ask them to review that first and then let us know if they had any remaining questions. The documentation that we included in this sort of, like security package of docs. First, an overview of the solution, some information about the product. You have to remember that the team that is doing the risk assessment is probably not the same team that is buying your solution. So giving them some context is great. And also remembering you don't need to sell them on the business value. The risk management team is not the one probably deciding which vendor to use, but they can stop you from using a vendor that's very risky. So information that is relevant to them is not really the business value, but more what data types are being collected, what's the data flow, if you can do data flow diagrams, those are huge. Required integrations and permissions. Also, as someone who does vendor assessments, these are always impossible to find. It's like my third email to some random person there where I finally find out what permissions this solution needs. And any security features built into the product. Does it integrate with the single sign-on solution provider they use? Are there RBAC features in there? That sort of stuff. Of course, secondly, overview of the InfoSec program and controls. So white papers are my favorite way to just give a big picture overview of the program. It gives you information in a much more digestible content than like a 8 bajillion line SIG questionnaire. We have a white paper for our corporate environment and for our product environment, which is a helpful breakdown for our customers. Standardized questionnaires, if you've had to fill one of these out for a customer and you actually feel really good about the content in there, like it's been reviewed adequately, there's nothing wrong with just proactively sending that to more customers. They might take that instead of their custom one. We also send an overview of our business continuity plan, our full set of InfoSec policies, and our data retention schedule, because it does make sense. Your customers want to know, how long are you keeping our data? How are you destroying it when you don't need it anymore? How could I get an exception to that process if I wanted to speed it up, for example? So that's what we include. And then lastly, obviously, third-party attestations yield pen test letters of attestation, SOC 2 report. It's one thing for us to say, oh, we've got so many great security controls in our environment. Everything looks great. Just checked it out this morning. It's another thing to have a third party come in and test that those controls are in fact working as designed. So, executing on our plan, it's Q3 2017 at this point. When we make the decision, we're going to stop just filling these out and we're going to push back with all of those documents. And in our first quarter of doing that, 50% of these assessments are closed out with docs alone. And I am simultaneously incredibly relieved about how much work we are saving ourselves and so angry at myself for not doing this sooner, because that is so much work. So even just with this first group that we're sending the documentation, they have no follow-up questions, it's totally done. We've cut our work in half. Second group of people, and this is my favorite group, they accept the documentation, they look through it, and then they have a few targeted follow-up questions, like really thoughtful questions about how it could impact their unique environment. And actually, this group is great too, because they ask questions about things we didn't include in the docs, and then we can add them and make the docs better. So obviously love this group because they're not doing like a check the box activity, they're like actually assessing the risk. So yeah, but of course, 5 follow-up questions, different than an 800 question questionnaire. So much better, so much less time. And about 15% of our customers still required we complete their security questionnaire from scratch. And a lot of times that was because their vendor management solutions would only accept info in a certain format, which I have strong opinions about because I don't think that approach works. But we're also a smaller company compared to a lot of our customers. So the amount of vendors that our team is managing is really different than, some of our Fortune 50 companies. So I do feel their pain in that respect. But we still got this 15 where we're filling them out from scratch. So they're getting the accurate information they need to do their assessments, while we are getting so much time back to actually do security work. And another plus for everyone is the process of doing the security assessment is actually going much, much faster now. So this is 2017. This green line here is the number of tickets. So you can see as we're getting into the end of the quarter, not surprising, we're getting more and more tickets, more and more deals. And in Q3, when we start pushing back with documents, we are, despite the fact that we're getting more tickets, we are still cutting the amount of time it takes us to close out those tickets by more than 50%. So that's great for customers. I know from experience doing vendor assessments, I don't want to be a blocker. I want to get the assessment done as quickly as I can to enable the business. And obviously, sales loves this because cutting 5 days out of the sales cycle can be the difference between a deal getting done in Q4 or getting pushed into Q1. So everyone is very pleased with this. Amazing progress, but there is still more that can be done. We are riding the high of the success and we're still wanting to make improvements on it. So up next, we make a little change in our workflow. Initially, these questionnaires were coming to us through sales and through customer success, whoever's customer facing, and going directly to InfoSec. We are adding a new team into this workflow. The content strategy team at Rapid7 does a lot of sales documentation, so they fill out RFPs, scope of work documents. They are documentation professionals. So questionnaire comes in through sales, goes to content strategy, they push back with the documents. 50% of the time, we never deal with it again. Love it. The other 50% of the time, if they have a few follow-up questions or needs to do the whole questionnaire, the content strategy team takes a first pass at filling that out. And they are able to do that because we have put all of our information from our documents and from our FAQs into their knowledge base. They use a solution called Ombud, O-M-B-U-D, but there's tons of these knowledge bases out there. And I mean, there might be one that is in use at your company today that you just don't do anything with now. So it might not even involve bringing in a new solution. It might just involve you putting your information into a solution that's already being used by a team that already exists. So, I mean, I would say for the first 2 years I worked at Rapid7, I did not know that a content strategy team existed. And this has turned into one of the most effective partnerships I have experienced in my 4 years there. So this is the same chart that we looked at before, but now instead of just 2017, we're going out into 2019. This is that same line we looked at when we started pushing back with docs. And over here, I have a mic, I can walk around, right? Okay, so over here, we kind of started experimenting with that new workflow over here, but we didn't want to force a cutover in Q4 because Q4 is crazy. So this is when we started forcing sales to use the new workflow. And as you can see, we have gone from taking 9 days to close out these assessments to getting them closed out in less than 1 day. So that is delightful for everyone involved. Also, just quick pro tip, if you do track this at your company, I would strongly recommend using the median because initially I was using the average and I did not see a trend. And then I used the median and I was like, yes, there it is. because you always have that one random ticket that's like open for 3 quarters that screws everything up. So tips for doing this effectively. Something that I could have done better. There was a lot of friction initially with sales because of that problem we talked about before, where it's very counterintuitive to do something that is different than the customer is asking you to do. So we did eventually meet with sales leadership. We had some great stats on how this actually reduced friction in the sales cycle. It shortens the deal cycle, and we got their buy-in so that if someone in sales was like, hey, the security team says they won't fill this out, but I'm not sending over this documentation. They told us to fill it out, someone needs to fill this out. And that gets escalated too. And also, I totally get where they're coming from. Like, I'm not the person who has to tell the customer if we didn't fill it out. That's someone in sales, and that can be an uncomfortable experience for them when they don't have this big picture context. So once we got that leadership, that buy-in from sales leadership, everyone was on the same page about like, oh, no, we know why you send the documentation. Like, actually, customers love the documentation. You should do that first. That's the process. We know it works. But we did that pretty reactively, whereas if we had thought up front about what teams need to have buy-in in this new workflow for it to actually work, we probably would have done that a lot earlier on. Obviously, partner with marketing. You're making documents. Make the documents look nice. Make the content digestible. The point here is to make our customers feel confident working with us, so having nice looking documents helps. Obviously, automate. We do this as security professionals wherever we can because we're very busy. We had a nice macro in our ticketing system that would just automatically attach all the docs. We could customize it based on what type of a customer they are. Lots of opportunities to automate this workflow. You're going to want to assign owners to every single piece of content, whether it is in your knowledge base or it's a white paper or something else. Your security program is changing all the time, and you want to keep this information up to date. And it's really a lot of work to do that, so it really needs to be someone's actual job, like an actual responsibility. And lastly, make the content self-serve wherever you can. Why not? If someone can complete their entire vendor assessment just by looking at stuff on your website and you never engage with them, great. Like, that's better for everyone. You can do security work. They can get their whole vendor assessment done without having to, go through sales and then security, and then that's wonderful. So we have trust.rapid7.com. Everything that is from that security documentation that is available without an NDA is on this website. And we also, if you need the SOC 2 or you need some other piece of documentation, the NDA is also self-serve on the website. So that keeps things moving. In terms of what's next, most important thing that we're going to be focusing on next, there's actually 2 enablement sessions. The content strategy team, that sales documentation team, is very, we work at a security company, so this might be unique, but they are really into learning more about security and active projects we have going on. So we're doing enablement sessions with them so they can answer questions in a really thoughtful way and reduce the amount of questions that are trickling through to the security team. And I'm very excited about enablement sessions with sales. So what we're working, they are totally bought in on the documentation, by the way. We just had a quarterly business review with the content strategy team, and they said that when sales comes to them now, they're not saying, hey, will you fill out this questionnaire? They're saying, hey, can you send over the docs? So they get it. But what we want to do now is work with them to move the vendor assessment process earlier in the deal cycle. So instead of waiting for the deal is about to close and the customer just found out that this is part of their procurement process and there's a rush to do it right at the end of, right before the deal is supposed to close, bring it up really, really early on in the deal cycle. And also, if your security posture is really good, if your documentation is really good, use that to your advantage. Use that as a competitive thing that you have that your customers don't. So also, I don't have a bullet for this, but there has been a lot of chatter about, and also just as I've been talking to other people about this at other companies, whether it might make sense to come up with a cutoff at which a deal size cutoff at which you would say, hey, if you're not spending a certain amount of money with us, we are not going to fill out your questionnaire. This is not something we have in place right now. I know it's very controversial because the amount of risk you are introducing to a company has nothing to do with how much money they're spending on your solutions. My thought on that is, I think that it is okay as long as you have a really thoughtful exception process to that rule. If they maybe are doing some sort of a unique implementation or using a different solution than the rest of your customers, maybe something like really niche that you offer, and you don't have proper documentation on that, it's really not fair to say, okay, well, then you just have to trust me because I'm just not going to tell you about our security controls. But if you do have the documentation, and you have to scale, right? Like if you have a very, very, very small services engagement or something, and a customer wants to spend 40 hours talking through security controls with you that you have already written down somewhere, it might make sense to have some sort of a process in place to draw the line. Again, not something we have in place today, but I know it's something a lot of people in this space have been talking about. So it is what I would call a spicy meatball. So, add me on Twitter and let's talk more about this. But also, I would love questions. Yes. Oh wait, we should give you a microphone. I saved 5 minutes for questions. I did it.
But have you done any mapping to different regulations, standards, controls, and questionnaires so that if they feel like it wasn't answered in your document, you can say, yes, actually, it maps directly to this one?
That's a good question. We do have a full SIG filled out for our bigger products, and we haven't mapped like our SIG questions to, we haven't mapped our SIG questions to like a CAIQ or whatever that one is, Cloud Security Alliance one. We haven't done that so much as like if we have it completed, we will give it to you. But it is weird. I feel like if they're being specific enough to say you didn't, that rarely happens to me. Like if they're being specific enough to say, oh, you didn't answer that question, and I can say, oh, I did. Like if they're actually reading the documentation, the follow-up questions are generally like, oh, wow, we didn't cover that. Like, yeah, I could definitely talk to you about that specific thing. I tend to get either, I want you to fill out the whole thing from scratch, or the follow-up question. Like we haven't done that because I don't think we have that problem too often. But it is an interesting, I think for various compliance frameworks it'd be interesting. We definitely map how our tools help our customers meet different compliance framework requirements. So it'd be interesting to see if we could do that for our internal security program.
So when you're answering questionnaires,
Great shirt, by the way.
which I get bombarded with questionnaires from major companies,
Yeah.
how do you draw the line with what is too much information to tell the vendor that sent you the questionnaire? Like I can tell them what all my OSs are, how many servers I've got, real specific data, but I feel that they don't need to know this information.
Right.
And do you decide that information yourself, or does some other security team decide what is actually proper to be shared out versus not?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, we have our sweet NDAs in place, and we err on the side of sharing more information than less. We definitely have situations where we get questions where our response is to explain why that information, and again, same questionnaire to every single vendor. If we can explain, hey, the answer to that question actually does not help you understand the risk of working with our company, that is generally how we would go about we don't want to share more information than we need to. We want them to have every single piece of information that they need to actually calculate the risk, but no more than that. And we do all the time say, like, hey, it just seems like based on the scope of work, this isn't relevant, but like, let us know if you want to talk more about that. And we don't get pushback on that very much.
Yesterday at the BSides CISO event, this issue came up, and what one of the CISOs recommended is that they companies charge a fee for non-standard questionnaires.
Was that my CISO? It might have been.
No, it wasn't your CISO, but this is a problem that's pandemic.
Yes, that actually, so that's another thing I've heard discussed a lot is, will we say we won't do it under a certain like deal size, or will we charge to complete them? I would say at this point, we have definitely talked about that. The logistics of that seem pretty challenging for us specifically. I know of other companies too where they specifically will actually say anything beyond this many engineering hours we will start charging for, whether that is like support beyond the regular support amount or something else. Like it is a framework that companies use. We don't use it yet.
Okay, I think we have time for just one more question, then everybody can feel free to catch up with Katie afterwards.
Hey, just curious if you considered, as you have to scale more, any of the like maturity models that are kind of in the works for highly regulated industries, like DoD is kind of trying to push one through this year. It's just rather than do this hand-to-hand combat, which it seems like you've sliced and diced very well. Getting that cert, and you can just show your merit badge and satisfy the. It is actually.
I am talking to customers all the time about if we do this cert, then what? Like what do we unlock with this cert? It is interesting to me. We have a SOC 2. I think next on our roadmap would probably be ISO 27001. It is really interesting to me that talking to peers. For how many people that does not seem to reduce, especially that 15% who says, okay, great that you have that certification, but there's only one way for me to import information into my risk management system, and it's with this questionnaire. But I do think, honestly, like a company that I think does this really well is Atlassian. They will not answer your questionnaire. They do not care how much money you have. And they also have every certification. They're just like, okay, yeah, what control hasn't been tested by a third party? Like I have certs on certs on certs. So I think they can really get away with that. Like if you can't accept those and you really need like a junior security analyst to write down the answer to believe it, I think that's a you problem and Atlassian is still thriving. I would say maturity-wise, for our internal security team, we aren't at their level yet. We don't have certs on certs on certs. So I'm still going to keep answering these until we have those. But when our trust page looks like Atlassian's trust page, I'm never going to answer another questionnaire again. So.
Well, in the meantime, you can write some macros to fill up the spreadsheets for that 50%.
Oh, that's what actually Ombud, the knowledge-based solution that our content strategy team uses, does predictive answering. So they're not even copying and pasting. They are thriving. They're just auto-populate, gonna go sit in a hammock now. Everyone's living their best life. It's great. I should be sponsored by Ombud. If anyone knows anyone there, get them in touch.
All right, thank you, Katie, very much for your great talk.